Welcome back to another episode of Streaking with Friends. We have a great episode in store for you today with a person that I've just recently become connected with. He hails from the United Kingdom and he goes by the name of Godfather Solutions, and he is here to offer insights on mental health and relationship dynamics, which fits well within the theme of Streaking with Friends, which there's very much a mental health component to what we're doing. So, Godfather, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Jason. Lovely meeting you, and it's great that you've invited me onto your podcast.
That's wonderful, man. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I feel like some of our brief interactions lead me to believe that you can be helpful to our audience. So, give you an idea of what we tend to focus on. I like the kind of three elements of fitness, also thinking about finances, but then also family. And I think that you might fit most in this last category of family, right? And when I think about family, I also think about friends with that. So
Yeah.
the relationships in our life, and the way that mental health fits into that. I'm thinking that you'll be able to offer some insights there. So, in a very open way, I want to kind of just give you the floor and maybe introduce yourself to the audience in a way that might help them have just a better understanding of what you might be able to offer today.
Hi, everybody. I am Godfather Solutions. Throughout this conversation, I will be referred to as Godfather, and what I basically do is I help people that are on a mental health journey just to improve the quality of life that people have or people wanting to have. And I've just recently connected, as our esteemed host has just mentioned, that we've just recently connected and we thought it would be a brilliant idea to offer some insights on mental health. And because I'm across the pond in the United Kingdom, we have certain elements of dealing with mental health that may be slightly different to how it's probably done in the States, but all in all, I do feel like it aligns together. It's just the play with wording. So I'm just here to offer insights on mental health, even though I offer intermarital relationship dynamics and solutions for that and offer counseling sessions based on that. But today, our main focus is mental health, and I'm here with the host Jason, and hopefully we're going to be exploring further options and having a conversation in duality to hopefully offer some insights to you guys.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for that. So my mind goes, Godfather, to a place initially to maybe ask about, as we think about reflecting on our past, right? And we think about reflecting on some of the meaning and significance of what brought us to where we are now and your choice to be in this space of mental health. So do you mind maybe sharing with the audience and telling me, what got you into the field of mental health? What was your initial inspiration to that caused you to want to pursue this as a career and maybe even as a passion?
Awesome. So essentially, what you said was nail on the head. Past decisions and past life experiences do have a big hold on when it comes to our decision making with mental health. Me personally, I went through a journey where I suffered from severe depression and anxiety, and I wanted to overcome. I've always been someone that has dealt with trials and tribulations head on.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been involved in Muay Thai and boxing, so I'm quite a combative person when it comes to self-defense and sports. So when I eventually met my depression and anxiety, which dawned upon me, I was overwhelmed. I felt like my body, the system within my body was hacked, and I wasn't able to control or navigate myself accordingly. So I wanted to overcome this obstacle. Just in a nutshell, I wanted to do this without taking any sort of medication, and I wanted to see if this was possible. And
Mm-hmm.
upon thorough research, and pushing myself, I was able to overcome it. It wasn't easy, but I overcame it. And for me, this gave me my personal journey was anxiety and depression, which led me down the road of, right, actually, I want to study into this. I want to qualify into this. I want to be able to help others who are on a similar path or is currently within, you know, they are currently suffering from such mental illness. And I do believe that from my own insights and educate my own studies that I found, I wanted to share this with the world.
That's beautiful. Well, I'm glad whatever, was the initial prompt. Was there a certain, right? So you mentioned the depression, you mentioned some of that. Have you done any further deep work to maybe know where that might have stemmed from?
Yes, so I've always had a childhood phobia. Mine is slightly different because it also is linked with spirituality, and we briefly discussed this prior to the show that, spirituality is a huge booster when it comes to mental health. But also within spirituality and religions, there's certain elements that are very unknown. We're not really well versed when it comes to. We only know superficially what they are. So for me personally, I went through severe anxiety through there was a thing called ghosts and spirits and demons. I went down. So when I was younger, what happened was, since I was a child, I was always scared of the dark,
Hmm.
and for me, I was scared of things that might be in my room that I can't see, which scripture tells us about. But because of my lack of understanding of this at the time, and there was a lot of cultures around me, because UK is very diverse, it's very metropolitan where I live, and there's so many stories that was coming around. It used to terrify me at night, so I used to leave my light on, or I couldn't sleep alone. So
Hmm.
when I was going through my mental health journey, I seen where the link was, because that same feelings that I had in my childhood followed me to my adulthood. So that's where I sort of gained the knowledge and understanding that this is where my mental health issues stemmed from.
That's incredible. And kudos to you for being willing and courageous enough to do that work, right? To look at those some of those past experiences and realize that at some point you need to address them, right? I know you mentioned
Yeah.
in a physical sense being somewhat combative with Muay Thai and whatever other martial arts practices you have. I can very much relate to that. I grew up in such a way that often conflicts were resolved physically, right? It was more of a right hands and feet fighting and battling kind of thing in the streets of sorts to resolve conflict. And in a similar way to what you mentioned, as I moved into my adult life, it was a difficult transition to give up that as being the way to resolve conflict. And so for the longest time, I also struggled with conflict and still now really become uneasy when conflict arises
Mhm.
because partly I'm not very well versed at or I haven't been very well versed at dealing with it in an auditory way or in a compassionate way, and so it's taken a lot of growth for me as well. So yeah, so it's been quite a journey for me on that too as well. One thing that I might ask too, Godfather, as you mentioned that, so you mentioned that, right? So if that's the stem of where it originated, then maybe what was something that happened more recently or something that occurred in your life that caused for you to reflect on those things to further discover that about yourself? Was there something that happened, or did you finally just kind of, you know, get to how they say wits end or get to rock bottom? That was the
Mhm.
turning point. What was the turning point for you in your life?
So the turning point happened when it came to mental health. So I've always had the what I mentioned previously, phobia of the dark, phobia of something that's there that I don't know or can't see, something from a spiritual realm, something that can take hold of my body, and also the lack of awareness when it came to my religion at the time. Now, when I was going through a journey and these episodes of mental health, I often started believing that there was something wrong with me. And I
Yeah.
seen the link with other people that have had mental health struggles. They would also say there's something wrong with me. It's just that my journey was a little bit different towards other people. And there's certain people that are on similar journeys to me. Because the question comes back to its roots is, what is wrong with me? And my thing was, I'm feeling this anxiousness inside me. I'm feeling very sad. I'm feeling unmotivated. So surely I'm not acting myself. Therefore, is there a spirit with me? So I was having these conflicting thoughts running through my mind, and these phobias was exacerbated. And this was in my early 20s when this occurred to me. So I knew I had to tackle this head on and come to the bottom of why I'm feeling like this. Now, first things first, we have to remember I felt like I was falling from a building 24 hours in a day. I was feeling like
Mm,
that. The depression, I felt like my head was under 10 feet of water. I wasn't able to ingest conversation from people. I was in a
mm,
circular conversation with myself and others to consistently remind myself that there is something wrong with me. Now, at the end of it, the turning point for me is I have a warrior's code within me. And that says, am I going to live on my knees or am I going to get back up on my feet? And I thought, right, I'm going to face my adversity. I've faced all my problems previously in competition, whether it's in life or whether it's in the streets, head on. So why am I treating this any different? So the turning point for me was, Jason, I started to confront my fears. I started to confront my anxiety. I started to confront my depression. And I was unwavering in my determination to conquer myself and my journey and my mindset and it felt like my mind was in pieces and I had to re-screw everything to a more permanent and more resolute mindset so that I can transfer it better throughout my body so I can now improve my life and help others around me. Because what's the worst thing with mental health is knowing that you can't help yourself, but there's others that need you. And that gave me the will to say, you know what, I'm not taking this anymore. And and for me, the turning point is when I started confronting my fears. I didn't like it. I felt uneasy. I was terrified, I'll say. But I forced myself to get into the uncomfortable situations where even though my body is in a flight mode, I'm frightened, I stayed and I then started talking to myself, well, nothing's happened. So therefore, why can't I stay another 10 seconds in this anxiety like phase? And that's what was the turning point. And the beautiful thing about this, Jason, is not only did I conquer my fears, just to fast track this conversation, but not that I conquered my fears, but previous things that let me down. For example, sleeping with the light on, not being able to go to certain places by myself. I conquered all of those things by confronting my fears. I put my mindset in in a better position where I was better before my anxiety started. So I improved my life to the point where my anxiety and my depression. Prior to that, my life now is much better. I have none of these anchors in my life anymore. And I've made improvements by taking away, like, I don't have phobias anymore. Obviously, there's certain things that'll still get me, but I'm still a work in progress. But the main things that hindered me, I tackled them directly, and now I'm able to live a more fruitful life and be there for others.
that's beautiful. I notice a few things as you shared that. One of them being, and you kind of subtly mentioned it, right? But this idea that others are in need of you and that you have a bit of a responsibility to be there for them. And also, too, tapping back into the nature of yourself, which is a warrior, right? A warrior type of mindset, as you mentioned it, to face things head on. That's wonderful. So you basically just got fed up and said, I'm not being right? I'm not being my true self, right? I'm not exemplifying who I truly am. And other people are, not only am I suffering, but I'm also depriving others of who I could be if I were to overcome that. Does that sound pretty accurate?
That is nail on the head again, Jason.
Beautiful. One thing I might ask, Godfather, is so I'm thinking about the person that might be out there and they hear this and they hear this, this turnaround that you have. And they might be saying, yeah, it sounds great. I'm glad that you did that. I mean, it seems like you were just able to make the decision. You got to your point of being fed up and you did that. But if there were a practical offering, right? If there were a practical exercise, if there was something that someone could apply in their life that would allow for them to move in the direction, as you put, right? Move in the direction
Mhm.
of growth along your journey. What do you think that might be?
So, brilliant question again, Jason. My thing and what I've offered as well, I even made a video on this on my TikTok, which is Godfather Solutions. I made a TikTok to suggest, and I made a short analogy that everyone, like we all dug this hole, right? And I call this hole of anxiety and depression. We're digging this hole. Now we're now struggling to get out. Now, my thing is that there's many hands at the top of this hole offering to help you, but you're not going to reach them hands to assist you to get out unless you make that effort yourself. And another thing is because you're in this hole, the best person that understands the hole that you are in is yourself. So no matter who it is, no matter me, no matter if it's another therapist, no matter if it's a counselor, no one can really help you get out of the hole you are in, whether it's anxiety, depression, or whatever problems or adversities you've come across in life. You are the best person that understands this hole, and you're the only person that feels what it's like to be in this position. So what I would say is you need to make the effort to come out of this hole. Sometimes, a lot of the time, when people are in a certain position and we have family and loved ones around us and they identify that we are in a problem, but ultimately, for us to individually feel better, we need to make the attempt, the ascent upwards in order to reach the hands to help. So, in order to allow others to help you, one must help himself or herself.
That's beautiful. So you might offer that the first step is to take full and complete ownership that the responsibility for growth, for healing, for change, for improvement lies squarely on the shoulders of the individual.
Yeah. So ultimately, we are responsible because if I do not believe there's something wrong with me, and I've come across people that often feel like, you know what, they don't want to be honest with themselves and be like, you know what, I am going through anxiety, I am going through depression. And it's very common amongst men, they have this code of honor that they don't want to break, that they don't want to acknowledge that they are not mentally in a strong position. They're not mentally fit at the moment. They do not want to be seen as weak. So therefore they like to ignore all the problems and the sirens and the alarm bells that's going on around them. And they want to put themselves in a position of denial and not acknowledge it. So for someone like that, they're not going to improve themselves unless they unless they look introspectively inside themselves and think, right, I need to improve my quality of life. I need to improve. I am being an issue right now. I am not being myself. So for once you have that acknowledgement and once you have that desire that, you know what, I want to improve my life, that's when you are able to help, because no one can truly help you get out of a position. No one can force you to do better unless you're willing to do so yourself. And I think that's the only way. The crux of the issue is that we need to start with ourselves. And of course, there's people around us that can hold up mirrors or reflections of ourselves so that we can identify, well actually I do need help. So therefore I didn't realize this about myself. So of course, ultimately it does come back to you, but people can often hold up the mirror to us.
I see exactly what you're saying. A few things stood out to me just now as you were sharing. One of them is an unwillingness to be honest with yourself, right? So if we operate from a place of so much pride that we're unwilling to humble ourselves and be honest, then just to call it what it is, you don't deserve to grow. You don't deserve to experience the peace that's
Hmm.
available to you if you're
Hmm.
willing to humble yourself, you're willing to lower yourself, and you're willing to be open to the, as you mentioned, the many different hands that are reaching out to pull you out of the hole, to be open to what those solutions can offer, which come in the way of peace of mind, right? And
mhm,
so if we continue to operate from a place of pride as opposed to humility, then we're just going to continue to wallow in the frustration and wallow in the difficulty of those silent moments
mhm,
not being very silent, right? Those silent
mhm,
moments are very noisy and very troublesome. Um,
mhm.
and so that's kind of how I associate with it. Another question that I have, Godfather, is there a certain individual or a certain person that maybe you've looked to, whether they are a true in the world mentor, like a person that you've attached to that you've developed a personal relationship with? Or is there maybe a person in the past that you've read about through history, or a group of individuals or a certain concept? I'm just kind of looking for what you might be able to share as far as who you look to or who you lean on for inspiration and mentorship.
I'm sorry, Jason. I've just had a bit of a connection dip to there. Could you just the only part I got from that is who did I get my inspiration from in terms of my mental health?
Sure. So
Is that
I basically just had a very long-winded way of asking the question, which was basically just, is there a person or an individual in your life that you've established a relationship with that has served as a mentor for you? Or is there an individual in history that you've either read about or researched on? Or is there a group of people or a certain philosophy that you subscribe to that
right?
you know your inspiration from and would think of as kind of a mentor to aspire to?
Yes, absolutely. For me, I think it all comes back down for me personally, God. And there's always this saying that our God never burdens a soul more than it can bear. And I'm very strong on that. I don't believe that I will be overburdened to something that I will not be able to handle. And knowing that life is tests upon tests, it helps navigate through life more swiftly, knowing and having a belief system that there is a God. And for me, having God an active part of my life, remembering God, allows me to become more strong, allows me to become more capable because I know I'm being watched and looked over. Now, that's why I do believe that a belief system is the best. And obviously, whatever religion you're from, we have influential figures um, that offer advice. But for me personally, it's been God. So for me, it's I follow the religion of Islam, and the most influential person for me has been the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who we have biographies and we have written accounts of his life and how he overcome adversity, and through we call it the Sunnah, the actions of the Prophet, by copying it and replicating it in our own lives, it helps improve our lives. So that's what's helped me personally, and that's what's given me mental resilience as well. Like for me, at the end of everything that I've mentioned to you, for me personally, my strength, my mental strength and physical strength ultimately comes from spirituality. This is why in a lot of competition, or if you watch the UFC or boxing, a lot of them, the fighters would refer back to God being the anchor point, the strength that they've got, and the thanks and the gratefulness they give it back to God. And even the Christian fighters do the same thing.
Godfather, I love that. What I just heard you say was that independent of whatever your faith belief is, the idea that there is a God and that He is there for you to give you the confidence, to give you the courage, that you're prepared for whatever challenges you face. That's a beautiful reassurance, right?
Absolutely.
That's a beautiful, and I'm sure individuals that have that as a part of their life, again, independent of whichever faith-based practice it is, allows that person to operate more confidently, to move more boldly, and ultimately to live with more peace, but ultimately to have the greatest impact, right? The way to have the greatest impact, boldly move in the direction of making yourself available to help others without hesitation, right? This idea of being lukewarm, this idea of kind of sitting in the middle on the fence. Should I or should I not? And you kind of waffling back and forth. No, no, no. right? Let's get moving in a direction and then let's accelerate the motion in that direction. And what I've often seen through different examples throughout my life is watching people that start with a very small step and then over time with consistency are able to build it up into a rolling boulder that almost can't be stopped. But without that initial spark, without that initial step, they wouldn't have been able to even move in that direction.
That's brilliant. I really like how you said that. That's brilliant. Because with the boulder, you gain momentum, and you're right, that initial push is difficult. But once that boulder's moving, the momentum builds, and before you know it, it becomes that strong. It's very difficult to stop it. It's just having that perseverance to maybe crack this rock and this to create this boulder to just get it rolling. And people often neglect that to get yourself in this position, you do need to put that effort in. So I absolutely agree with that. That's a brilliant statement right there.
Thank you. Another thought that I have, Godfather, is what might you say? Obviously, you have experience visiting with people and making yourself available to others through your practice, to provide therapy for individuals, as well as you mentioned doing some premarital counseling, and I'm guessing you do some type of marital counseling as well.
Yep.
Um, what do you find is one of the biggest myths or biggest challenges that sit in the way of people having healthy, positive, and constructive relationships? What do you feel like is one of the biggest missteps or mistakes that people sit with?
The biggest missteps and mistakes people come in with is being selfish. So, for example,
Hmm.
and Jason, it's very interesting that you mentioned this because this might ring some bells across the board here. Now, what I have found is if someone comes in, and often time when they do come in, and they don't have a strong belief system, they don't have a sustainable source of objective morality where they can get it from, and they don't have that, they often do butt heads. And another thing is not having a clear and concise conversation prior to engaging in a long-term relationship, just to talk about the future that they want with each other, because everyone's got aspirations and goals, and I am not someone that says opposite attracts. I say go for someone similar to you that is on same paths as you. And when it comes to like marriage and stuff like this, like what me and Jason mentioned, we talked about spirituality. Now, by Western research, by Pew Research standards, that traditional marriages with religion are the best. They're the best family marriage dynamics you can have that are the more sustainable, which is very interesting. Which is why I said you're going to find this interesting, and you can find that in Pew Research. And so, just to anchor the point back, yes, I'd say the main thing is when you're approaching someone, I don't believe that you should ever disguise yourself as someone else or disguise yourself as someone that's going to just impress this person for the
Mhm.
week. If you want to get into a committed relationship, be yourself, be
Sure.
confident in yourself, and convey a message where what you want in your future and what they want in their future. And you have to be honest. It might sound robotic, it might sound monotone, but it's very important that we just don't be very living like there's a lot of people that say just live in the moment, enjoy yourself. Yeah, that's all well and done, but then once you're in a seriously committed relationship and you're living with your partner and then kids are involved, it can become very sticky. So therefore, have that open and transparent conversation to begin with.
Man, I love hearing that because I'm expecting that a good number of people that might hear this, that's going to be a bit of a shock for them, or not, maybe not a shock, but a reminder, right? It'll be a bit of a
Mhm.
reminder to say, be less selfish and more, right? More donating of self, more offering of self, but also too, that piece that you mentioned about transparency, right? I feel like
Yeah.
transparency in relationships and honesty in relationships is something that is often the source of a lot of struggle and a source of a lot of relationships that go sideways. Because something that you alluded to earlier that you mentioned was this idea of feeling like you were on this unique journey that's different from everyone else, right? But I think if we were to really draw a thread through this whole thing, is we are all on our own unique journey, but at the same time, we have a bit of a responsibility to own up to what that feels like for ourselves and for others. And if we're planning on spending the rest of our lives with someone, then I think it's our responsibility to be as open and as honest with them as we can be. But in my experience, we can only be as honest with that other person as willing as we are able to be honest with ourselves. And so that really ties it back into your point earlier, that we really need to bear the burden of taking on responsibility for that growth and development, being honest with ourselves. Only then can we engage in a marital relationship or a relationship with someone else with honesty, because we've done the work necessary to overcome our own stuff
Yeah,
and operate from a place of truth in that new relationship.
absolutely. And just to correlate a few more points there, yes, we have to be generous in how we conduct ourselves and how honest we are, our transparencies. I absolutely agree with that. But also on a personal point for those that are thinking about themselves as well and thinking, well, why should I always be honest when, it doesn't get me anywhere? Or they might think that maybe it's not the right route, maybe I should enjoy myself. But I got another point to add to that. This actually works in favor for you as well. Because when you're being honest, and a lot of the time, when you're having an open, honest, serious dialogue with your potential partner, and you're invoking responses for them, because it's an exchange. We're giving each other answers on what we want in our future. We can then study the other person and realize, is this person really someone I want to be with? Has this person got certain character traits? For example, does he have any narcissistic tendencies? Because I'm telling you now, guys, if you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to be blindsided by everything and just be totally in love, and it takes maturity to understand that, look, I understand how I feel, but to save ourselves and to have a fruitful relationship, let's have a conversation that's needed. Let's not talk about what happened in Witcher or whatever movie that you watched. Let's have a conversation about us and our future, and let's understand each other's personalities. Because just as a little side note, just so that your viewers can understand, that what if you don't do that, and what if you blindly just commit yourself into a relationship just based on feelings, and then the person that you thought was an angel turns out to be a monster in disguise, and your life, and I'm telling you guys, it can really severely impact your life drastically, to the point where people have not come out the other side, you know, themselves anymore. So I'm telling you guys from experience, from sessions that I've conducted, try to save yourself as much as you can, because later on you don't want to be harsh with yourself and say, why did I not do the due diligence when I had the chance?
Yeah, it fits in line with this idea of putting on, right? If you're putting on in such a way that you have this bit of a facade that you think is going to be attractive to the partner that you would like to be with, but if it's really just surface and it's not actually how you feel deeper down, then you're going to become exhausted, right? You're going to become exhausted by effort that it takes to constantly be adapting and adjusting and changing to that, tailor yourself to a way that that you perceive they would like to have, instead of just being sincere, being true, being authentic, being honest. And then you never have to worry about what was said or what wasn't said. You just act and operate from a place of transparency all the way through.
Absolutely. You do not, the facade you put on is more
Yes,
exerting of your energy. So being real to yourself
that's right.
is also doing yourself justice, because at the end of the day, you're not conning someone else. And you got to remember, guys, when it comes to a relationship, when you con someone else, you're ultimately conning yourself. Because down the line, when this person sees what you really are or what you really want, not to say that you're a bad person or whatever, but you might have different goals, but because of that deceit to begin with and to lie just to impress the other person, you're now living a lie and you won't be able to maintain it. So why not be honest to begin with, like Jason says so? And
Sure.
what I advise.
Godfather, this is so fascinating. And of course, I can spend a tremendous amount of time talking about the importance of transparency and vulnerability and all that. But I would like to, in the sense that this is a bit of a global conversation, right? In the sense that, as you mentioned earlier, you are across the pond from me. So, what,
Yeah.
in your experience, has been maybe some of the differences in either your personal practice and/or the research and/or conversations that you've had with Americans? What are maybe some of the similarities around mental health and therapy and the way that you've done the work that you do? And what are maybe some of the differences between the United States and the United Kingdom?
That's a very good question. Very, very good question. From what I've seen, when it comes to like the Americans that I've come across, they have been more open to talk about things, to talk about the mental health. Whereas in the UK, it's more from my own uh, other people might have different experiences, but people they feel more shelled in here. They feel like there's more honor at stake when they open up or talk about the mental health
Mm,
from what I've seen. But the similarities I have seen is that I feel like it's not talked about as much. There's signs and posters. Here's mental health. Here's this, and then there's opposite conversations taking place by polarizing figures that say, well, actually, mental health is all made up. You're just doing it to yourself, which is untrue. Mental health is definitely a thing. But I think the solutions towards achieving, a healthy mindset, a healthy mind, it varies. And if from the American sense, I've come across I've had quite a few conversations with life coaches and people that are in mental health practitioners, and what I've noticed in the difference is that they a lot of them, I don't know, they seem quite harsh from what I've seen. There's people like yourself that are very fluid in terms of your conversation. You're able to listen and to interpret, whereas some people just become really bashful and arrogant. And I'd say because it's difficult because I feel like there's so much similarities to it. The struggles are the same. It literally it's very same. They're meeting each other, anxiety, the depression. The reasonings for this is across the board. They're matching with each other. They're pairing up from the UK side to the state side. So yeah, I said that's my take on it. What would you say, Jason? I'd be interested to know what's your observations from this or from people from the UK in comparison to the States?
sure. So admittedly, I have limited exposure to people from across the pond. That is due to change, right? So part of my plan is to really allow for what I do to be more expansive, right? And to really reach, honestly, if I'm being a bit bold and a little bit forecasting, I would like to reach all corners of the world with this message. And it is that once you've done the work for yourself and you've, in a sense, healed, right? And you've grown to a place where you've worked through and overcome all of the insecurities and all of the apprehensions and all of the fears, that you can move about freely and interact with others in such a way that is so confident and so respectful and so not holding others on a pedestal, but not pressing them below your feet either, right? It's this opportunity that you and I have that regardless of your faith background, regardless of your upbringing, regardless of what you've been through or what you've accomplished, right? Successes and failures, that because of what I've spent time on, that I can approach you in a certain way on an even playing field that says, I fully respect you for all of what you've been through and all of what you've accomplished, but at the same time, I'm not going to place you above me, right? And so I know that I carry with me a similar journey in that I've had difficulties and struggles that I've had to work through. I've also had victories and accomplishments that I could, quote unquote, be proud of. But at the same time, I approach you, regardless of whether you're from the UK, whether you're from Japan, whether you're from South Africa, whether you're from South America, or from the United States. I approach you in such a just sincere and honest way that I give you the benefit of the doubt when it comes to you having my best interest at heart and also wanting to receive and enjoy what you deserve, which is a fair shake, right? You deserve a fair shake in this conversation as well. And so I think that there's plenty of room, honestly, Godfather, for improvement in that way, that people can live with less apprehension, less fear, and operate with more confidence and more boldness, being true to who they are. But being true to who they are doesn't mean that you have to infringe on someone else's freedom or someone else's also allowance to be themselves as well.
Absolutely. What you said there was nail on the head. Everybody is on a journey. Everybody is having struggles and problems unique to themselves. We can never, like, what we're trying to say here is we can never really say to you, well, we know exactly what it feels like to be in your position because we don't know how your feelings operate. We don't know how hurt you are. Something might hurt me in a particular way and it might not hurt Jason or your friends. We all have this unique journey, and it's very interesting what you mentioned here because you're right, it is universal, and this is what I agree with. I feel like we're both on the same page here, but because when we have our principles, which is to be empathetic towards the person that is going on a journey, to have an understanding, to listen, to hear them out, not to blindly judge and say, well, whatever they're going through, I wouldn't feel the same way. No, I think what we offer is to try to fit ourselves in your shoes, to try get you out of this hole that you're in. And it's brilliant because this message is universal that way. Because regardless of, we are independent of our beliefs, our morality, but when it comes to you, we have to adapt to understand you, to get you in a position where you are feeling much better. You have mental stability. You're physically feeling it, because when you're mentally going through something, your physical abilities also diminish with it. So it's brilliant that you said this because it does take someone. Like, for example, when me and you have been talking with each other, we've been very cordial with each other. I've been observing the way you speak, you do interject, you listen, and these are key quality, guys, to have someone that truly wants to understand what you're going through and to help you. And I find that amazing, Jason. It's really good. And I do really think that your work, from just the conversations that we've had today, as brief as they have been, because these topics, like you said, we can go on for hours about it. But from my understanding, from how you portrayed yourself and how we've been having our conversations, these things can help people across the pond, across the oceans, wherever you are, because it's universal. It appeals to every human being, and that's what it comes down to. We are human beings, and we need to be able to have these conversations. And you're not going to fit this criteria if you're not open to listen to your clients. You're not open to listen to the struggles that they have. You're not open to understanding them. Without these things, and if you're just arrogantly speaking and you just tell them, well, this is how it is, that's not the right way. And then unfortunately, a lot of practitioners, they don't have that. They don't have that sentiment. And from what you've just described there, it fits beautifully towards the theme of what you want to do.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and I'm glad to hear that you subscribe to a similar pattern of thought and similar approach to things. Something I might offer, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on this. I feel like today, with being, I feel like we're just coming out of what people refer to as this information age, right? The idea that more new information and new articles are being published more and more, and there's more data that's created on a daily basis than there ever has been before. And so we're in this constant need in humanity that the answer to our struggles and the answer to our frustrations is to learn something new, right? Meaning to acquire some new skill or to acquire some new item or to acquire some new understanding. And I would submit that the acquisition of that new understanding is key, but you don't necessarily need to gather and store more information for the real growth to occur. What I would submit is that most people would benefit most significantly by removing the labels, the attachments, and the beliefs that they carry with them from the past that no longer serve them. And so, as part of my journey for myself personally, and part of what I will continue to share with others, is to examine yourself objectively and honestly and look at some of the things that you carry with you. And when I say things, some of the beliefs that you carry with you, some of the labels that you carry with you, some of the attachments that you carry with you, and really consider whether it best serves you and everyone else to maintain that thought. And if it is true, if the thought that you have is that it does benefit you and everyone else to maintain that thought, then great, continue to do that. But in my experience, I've noticed that as I really look hard and I really shine a light on some of these beliefs and some of these labels and some of these attachments, I often realize that it doesn't serve me or others for me to continue to carry that with me. So I do the best I can to let it go.
Awesome. I agree with that wholly and truly. There's a thing that I come across in sociology is the labeling that we put on ourselves or people put on you, that you actually live up to become that label that's been stemmed on you,
Yeah.
that's been placed on you, sorry. Now, getting rid of these shackles and these doubtful beliefs that are detrimental to yourself, or certain beliefs that you've matured, you've now transitioned to a more everyday. I believe every day we move forward in life, we go through a process of maturing, and there's certain beliefs and labels that we do need to drop. I call them the chains
Mm.
that we wrap ourselves within to appease others around us. Sometimes we may want to bend how we are and how we feel around. Obviously, like it's good to have to fit into society, but sometimes society and our communities can limit us to achieving what we need to become. So therefore, if we want to be more ambitious and we want to become better and want to have a better outcome from life, we do need to drop these negative chains and being honest and looking introspectively and analyzing that, you know what, maybe this is what I need to do now. I cannot move forward living to appease. It can be even your siblings. It could be even your partner. It can be, if these things are limiting you, sometimes there's better things to attach yourself to and there's better ideas, because this is what life's about, is to develop ourselves, to become better, to become the best versions of ourselves. We don't want to reach old age and think, wow, I wish I could have done these things, because that's when you start realizing, actually, why did I let people limit me? Why did I live to just appease others? But of course, we need to also be understanding of the decisions that we make. This does not mean you jump the wagon and start doing extreme stunts or something, but something that you can moderate with, that is actually good for yourself, that is actually good for society. But people, because of labels on what you think others might say,
Yeah.
therefore it's going to limit me. So I
I love
agree
how
with you.
you even I love how you even mentioned the importance of maybe ridding yourself of the limiting beliefs of those around you, even the
Mhm.
people that are closest to you. And the reason why it stood out to me is because I've spent a decent amount of time. I know that you mentioned being a part of the Islamic faith, which again, I can't emphasize more how important it is that people have some type of faith belief and adhere to it and further delve into it to better understand it. to establish what you mentioned earlier, that framework for morality and that framework for how to operate. But one piece of scripture that stems from a more Christian belief is the idea that you cannot and you are not prepared for the kingdom of heaven unless you, and the term is pretty harsh. It says, unless you hate your mother and your father, unless you hate your siblings, unless you hate your spouse. And it even says, unless you hate yourself. And so to me, my interpretation of that, or my, to use that as a bit of a framework to how I unpack that, is the idea that we should so fervently cast aside those old ways, that we those old limiting beliefs, that is the path for us to really ascend. To your point, that's the path for us to ascend to, self-actualization. That's the path for us to ascend to the highest or best version of ourselves, whatever language you want to use to refer to it. But that's the way for us to live in salvation, or live in the grace of God, or live in the kingdom of heaven, which is to fervently cast aside some of those, less than serving, or, broken beliefs or limiting beliefs.
And just as a footnote to that, it's amazing that we're talking about religion and how amazing religion is. I can't stress enough how important it is, how important religion really is, because for people like myself or Jason that have a belief system, you got to remember in our belief system, we understand that people, family, friends can come and go, but God is always consistently there. And we always have that reliable source of sustenance that we gain from having good spirituality and connection with God. And when you have this system where you know that, you know what, regardless of who comes and go, I always have something there. That, if we just look at this in a mental health perspective, what can that do for someone? Having someone there, this might be alien to some people that are listening to this, but having that understanding and belief that there is God, there is a God there for you, and that He is understanding and He understands you. He's closer to you than your jugular vein. This is an Islamic saying,
I love that. That
and
is beautiful.
and therefore, these problems that I have, I know there's a heaven after. I know that He understands what I'm going through. I know when I close my eyes and my tears are flowing to my beard or to my face or to wherever it's flowing to, I know that there's someone listening to me and understands me. And
Mhm.
people fail to understand how powerful that really is and how much that improves mental health within people. Because you got to remember, when you have a belief system, we don't like to think hedonistically to the extent of life and thinking of things that are very vulgar or disgusting. And when you have a belief system, and Jason, you might agree with this, it limits you from thinking too far in any direction, which can be disturbing or wrong, because you have this, it's like a safety net over your mind. It's very, I'm trying to explain this the best way so that viewers can really understand and ingest that. When you have this, your mindset also has this safety net over it. And of course, there's people within the faith that can deviate, and they can do some silly things, or they can have tests within mental health. I did. But what spirituality did for me personally, it really helped anchor myself back to the ground, because it sometimes feels like, yeah, it's like the movie, the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, when they drink the potion that makes them levitate and they can't control themselves and they're about to hit the ceiling. But then when I have God, I feel like that anchor comes back down and places me back on the ground where I can walk and be in control again.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. What I feel like you just shared, Godfather, is this idea that allow for the belief system to enhance your experience, but do the best you can to remove the limitations that tend to be inherent of it. Meaning, I can operate from my belief system, you can operate from your belief system. We can both wholly and completely have respect and appreciation for one another, but I don't have to let what you've defined as your belief system define who you are for me or to me in this interaction. Meaning that if you use a certain word to describe yourself, I give it some bit of merit, I give it some bit of consideration, but for the most part, and maybe you can relate to this or not, Godfather, but for the most part, what I strive to do is give the individual in front of me the best and most honest opportunity I can to allow them to surprise me, independent of whatever label that either they've assigned to themselves or that society has assigned to themselves or that their ethnicity has assigned, regardless of what these labels are. But I do the best I can. And even as I'm saying this, let me remind you, I don't execute flawlessly, right? But it's a concept in my mind that I allow the individual in front of me, I allow the person that I'm in front of to be the absolute most important thing to me, because the truth is they are in this moment, right? So in this moment, I'm the most important person to you, and you're the most important person to me in my concept of how we interact. Now, does that take into consideration the fact that, I might have a family outside of this conversation? Yes, it does, in fact, take that into consideration because I have all of those relationships as well. But as for this moment and as for right now, there's really nothing that matters more than me attempting to bring as much of my attention into this moment as I can possibly gather together to be most respectful of our time together.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, it ties back into our conversation that we had before. We're all in our independent journeys, and our job really is to understand the people across from us and to not really, we have our anchor points and our beliefs that we've acquired that through life. Now, when you're looking at someone else, they've got their own path that they've followed their own journey. They might be into other, like we mentioned, Christianity and Islam here, but they could be a Buddhist, they could be a Hindu, they could be a Sikh. They've got their own journey that anchored them,
Pick
and
one.
they've
Yeah,
got their own,
any
yeah,
number of them, right? Yeah, pick one.
yeah.
It doesn't right.
Just pick one, yeah. And but our job really is to get an understanding of you, your journey, what trials and tribulations you've been through, and to really put ourselves in your shoes and to come out with these solutions that we can invoke within yourself. Because ultimately we do have the answer within ourselves. It's just that it might be locked in a cupboard under the stairs behind a microwave, and sometimes you just need someone
Yeah.
to just explore this house with you in your mind. And not only that, I do believe, and I don't feel like it's taught enough within our profession, is that we do need to invoke and encourage people to get out of the damning cycle that they're in, to come out and live a better. Because sometimes be so neutral in a conversation, and I'll witness this, Jason, where people are just being like, okay, so what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Okay, take care, bye bye. I don't think that offers someone, it doesn't allow them to really explore someone, to really understand someone and build a connection with someone. And like you said, when you're with this person that needs your help, regardless, it might be the marital, it might be two people, it might be mental health, you really need to understand from their position. They might have their own set of rules and agreements that they've had between themselves. So to gain that understanding with these individual or individual, you then learn to seek out this solution that they have within them that can help them in the long run.
Sure. I love how you put that, and I think it's really great what you're doing in that you hold yourself out as someone who you make yourself available to help. And so a lot of times the people who come to you are raising their hand and saying, I'm open to help. And I'm sure that you've experienced this because I have as well, is the idea of even though someone on the surface says that they would like help or they want to adjust something, they want to change something, you have to spend enough time with them to really test them on their willingness to make changes in their adjustments, because change on the surface sounds great when you associate positive things with change, but then when it comes time to actually make the disciplined decision that required in your behaviors and in the way that you operate and the way that you approach things, I think the fervent nature in which people seek change kind of diminishes, right? And it becomes a little bit of a weaker, it becomes more of like, oh, it would be nice if things were better. It would be nice if things were easier, as opposed to what you mentioned earlier was this kind of, real need for, finding a solution, like a real need for improvement. Those are two very different things. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. And I've got something to add to that, which is basically, do you remember the analogy that I given where there's a hole and there is
I do.
you create this hole, and then the deeper you go, then you understand this. I've got something to add to that that you might like. Sometimes the people that are on top of this hole that's offering the extending their hand out to you or trying to throw a rope, some people might throw water at you or to try fill this hole up with water. Now the person within this hole might think this person's trying to drown me or is trying to make me suffer more. But then they look down and they realize, oh, actually there's water here. I'm starting to levitate with this water a little bit. This water is actually helping. Now there's two things that you can take from this scenario. Either you let that water sink by plugging a hole in the ground, or you use this water that you might think this person is discrediting you or disrespecting you or making you suffer, or use that to levitate upwards with it or to swim upwards from this hole. And I use that analogy in towards your conversation to tie it back to the points that you mentioned, that ultimately, if you are not going to sometimes you might disregard what we say or you don't want to explore and this, that, the other. You are maybe limiting yourself. You might be thinking this person is infringing in my personal space and he doesn't respect my conversation. He doesn't respect my experiences. When we actually do, then you get to a point where you actually think, okay, this person might be helping me. Is how you look at things, and that's how you start to help yourself instead of limit yourself.
That's beautiful. I think about it this way, that as you further grow and as you further develop, you recognize that all experiences you're a part of are for you, right? As opposed to thinking that they are against you, right? And so, to your point, while you're in the hole, you can perceive that person throwing water on you as trying to drown you and being combative, or you can appropriately recognize that that water really just serves as an opportunity for, as you mentioned, to levitate and for you to eventually be able to swim and climb out of the hole. And so, this thought process around knowing that every single occurrence in your life has meaning, has purpose, and is divinely orchestrated as part of the plan, that's an important perspective to maintain, because only from that place can you recognize that painful moments still serve a purpose, and that we all each have an individual opportunity to grow through the most painful moments of our life, right? The most painful things that we've ever experienced is really just a character building opportunity for us, so that we are reminded, to your point earlier, of the fact that we are always prepared for the things that come against us. And then we might not take a tangible lesson from it, right? We might not take a lesson that says, okay, I experienced this and now I'm able to do this as a result of it. So we don't really have clarity around what the lesson is, but what I'm certain it can serve as is relatability to someone well further down your path, that you meet someone years from now, and the only way that you could possibly let that person hear you or know that you can relate to them is because you're willing to share the fact that you've gone through a similar experience to them, or you've gone through something that might have been particularly trying for you. And that is the key thing that unlocks for that person how strong they are. And so I think that it's a bit of a reciprocal thing, that not only does it build character for us, but it's also a moment of inspiration for someone else who's familiar with the story. And that's what I feel like is happening right now with this podcast, because I would like for people to become comfortable enough and bold enough to be willing to tell their own challenging story, to first of all to heal from it for themselves, but then also to extend that hand and make that inspiration available to others who might not be as comfortable with the fact that they've gone through something similar, but they might be inspired by it by learning of a story that's shared here.
Absolutely. And just something that I want to share with you as well is the quote that I came across. Is sometimes we may need to use the darkness as a lamp to find the light within us.
That's beautiful.
And it's interesting because what you mentioned at the end point there is yes, we may be the people that might help other people, like mine and your personality. We might be very open, we might be extroverted, we may be able to communicate very clearly, we may be able to articulate ourselves, but we may not fit every single box that's out there. There might be certain people that can only connect with people with a certain personality trait or description that's similar to them, and me and you might not have it. But what you mentioned is that through the help that you might have attained from this podcast, but from your own experiences or help that you've received, you may be able to articulate yourself to this particular person better. So that way you can help share the light and become a beacon of hope to other people because of the respect, because of the understanding of the position that you was once in. That has now enabled you to say, I wouldn't want someone else to go through that. So therefore, I'm going to help you like someone has helped.
That's beautiful. I think that that also brings to light, Godfather, and I know because of your nature and because of my nature, neither one of us approached this conversation from the perspective that I'm about to mention, but from the audience point of view, or from a great number of people's point of view, or from society's point of view, you and I are two very different people on many different metrics, right? Many different ethnicities, different beliefs, different religious practices, different disciplines, different in so many different ways. But yet there's a mutual respect and there's a coming together that we're able to have a bit of an open dialogue and recognize some of the unity that exists between, on the surface, two seemingly very different people, but yet we can have, as you mentioned a second ago, a cordial conversation that's comfortable and that's encouraging, and can recognize some of the beauty of two very different people coming together with a common goal of growing for ourselves, but then also maybe providing inspiration to someone else who is looking to grow.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant. That is so true what you just mentioned there. And that is a very valid point for the listeners to take notice of, is the fact that mine and your belief systems, ethnicities, there's so many cultures are very differently aligned, yet we're having a mutual cordial conversation, and it's an encouragement of each other without overstepping the barriers that we have for ourselves, and to then articulate ourselves, which is universal, which it comes back to the point that it is just not for you, for those that might be thinking, well, actually, these guys are off a belief system, but we're off a different belief system, yet we're still able to achieve a common goal. So therefore, what discounts you from the conversation, Mr. Listener or Mrs. Listener or Miss Listener?
Isn't that great?
That's awesome. That's a very good observation, and it's nice because there's certain viewers that probably noticed that too. That, well, from what we've seen from the propaganda machine, that our belief systems are against each other, when the reality of the situation is that we are more alike than we are not, and we have a similar goals. We might not be the same, but who's to say we can't respect each other and to understand each other? So, for example, when Jason was putting across his points, I understood from where he's coming from, and I agreed with it, and vice versa. And this is how we achieve fruitful conversations. And the real winners are everyone that's listening, because I really am hoping that people that are listening to this podcast are now coming to an understanding that, you know what, these guys, we've broken labels and stereotypes by just having this conversation with each other. So therefore, why can't we break this stereotype? Why can't we get rid of the hatefulness that we might have in each other? And this is not to say that me and Jason are flawless. We are not flawless. We are just striving towards becoming better day by day. And to have this mindset, you need to be open and willing to receive advice. And to the best conversationalists are also the best listeners. Because how are you able to communicate with someone without having the patience to listen to what they actually say? And it's awesome that we're having this conversation, and it's really good that we are actually spreading awareness in multiple layers here in different areas. And it's great because that's what you need. And it takes maturity, guys. It really does take maturity. And, at the end of the day, we're not perfect. We're just trying to make the world a little bit better for all you guys.
That's beautiful. And yes, I will echo the sentiment that we are both far from flawless, right? Godfather, I do have a bit of a time constraint, but I'm going to ask one kind of last question, but it's two questions together. And it's the first part of it is, to the extent that you would like for people to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you, and what means would you like for them to use to either access your services, or reach out to you for your help? Because again, I feel like part of the value of this is to promote the things that you're doing good, that those that listen to it might, lean on you or leverage you, or reach out to you. So I would like for that. So first, that how can they get in touch with you? And if the answer is you'll get the info to me and I can put it in the show notes, that's great. But then the other piece of that, the second part of this connectivity idea is there someone that you would like to connect with, and that you would proactively want to maybe announce or make it known that you have a desire to collaborate with, or connect with, or be in touch with the idea, if you announce it here, that maybe they come across it, maybe they don't, but you at least kind of put it in the universe that you want to be in touch with a certain type of person. And from my perspective, I think that that's healthy, because you've announced the idea of clarity around either a certain person or a certain space that you want to be in, and I feel like that can be fruitful for you and for that other person. So if you don't mind, maybe spend a second on both of those things, and of course, feel free to say, I don't really want to share on that. So yeah, what are your thoughts there, Godfather?
So I just wanted to clear one thing. So my name is Godfather Solutions is where you can find me. But the Godfather, for certain viewers that might be thinking, why has he named himself that? I based it on a movie. It's actually a mafia movie, which is the irony of all of this, but that people used to come for help or advice and solutions. So it's not Godfather in the sense of enlightened sense or a divine sense. It's just a caricature that I've come up with in my
Yeah, well,
own
you're
right.
you're channeling your Marlon Brando, huh?
That's it. And where you can find me, guys, is I'm on TikTok and I'm on Instagram. I'm currently working on a YouTube channel as well. So you can find me on Godfather Solutions on TikTok, and you can follow me there. You can inbox me if you need any, if you want to book any consultation, if you need any advice. My inbox is generally quite free for those that just want to share. I am replying to everyone the best way I can. Sometimes it can take a while because it is getting a little bit backlogged, but I do tend to spend time to connect to everyone. But right now, I'm making short videos on my channel of real accounts of people with their journeys and what they've come across when it comes to heartbreak, relationship advice, solutions to mental health, the whole analogy. I've given a little video on there. So you can find me on TikTok and Instagram, which is Godfather Solutions with an S at the end on TikTok, and Godfather Solution on Instagram. And I just wanted to give a shout out to there's another creator that's given me a voice on TikTok to share my journey. It is Wonder Woman UK, and she's spreading awareness for mental health and relationship dynamics as well. So I wanted to give her a shout out. And creators that I would like to connect with or speak to, I'd say anyone that is vocal who has experience with dealing with different relationships, or someone that wants to share a story with me that what they've been through. You can find me on the socials that I've previously listed. In terms of specific individuals, I won't say that yet, only because I'm still growing right now, and I don't know where I wouldn't be able to speak to them specifically right now because of the topics that they're currently covering in comparison to the topics that I'm covering. I don't think it aligns at the moment, but generally speaking, I am willing to speak to people like yourself, Jason, um, who are heavily involved in mental health, or are counselors, or do marital arbitrations, and just people that have had like stories that they can share with me, because I love to learn what people's journeys are. And for me, I am taking my own personal research with this and seeing everyone's journeys and what outcomes they had. Because it, for me, when I live through someone else, when they tell me their stories, it also gives me an understanding that actually there's people that think in a particular pattern, and it helps me grow as well. So that's all I would like to say, and it's been an absolute honor speaking to you, Jason. We've had a brilliant conversation with each other. We've gained a lot. I've gained a lot of understanding from what you've mentioned and what we mentioned. We've said a lot of things that are similar, but our paths are very unique. And I just want to shout out to anyone from the UK that might be listening to this to also, reach out to Jason if you need anything. Because a lot of the advice that he's mentioned here is very universal, and he's a very good conversationalist. And I do think that these are the types of people that you do want to have these conversations with. That's all I would like to say. Thank you very much, Jason.
Well, Godfather, and thank you. And I will reiterate my sentiments from earlier, but this has been most enjoyable for me. It's great to have been able to get to know you through this setting, and I'm glad we were able to connect. And yeah, to anyone out there, I'm ready and available and open to hear from and receive requests for whatever it looks like, guest submissions. Um, Personal outreach, one-on-ones, whatever that looks like. You can find me on the podcast. We'll be able to share the info. But Godfather Solutions, thank you so much for your time today, and be cool. Peace.
Thank you very much. Peace.